Fake HOA accused me of theft. Security footage cleared me instantly. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over Willow Creek, a suburban neighborhood where picket fences and manicured lawns whispered of quiet dreams. Marcus Thompson loved this place. He'd moved here 2 years ago, seeking a fresh start after a messy divorce. At 34, he was a man of simple pleasures, tending his small garden, waving to neighbors, and savoring the peace of a life unburdened by drama. But peace, as Marcus would soon learn, was fragile. It started with a single accusation, sharp and venomous, like a dart hurled in the dark. Karen Whitaker was the kind of woman who thrived on control. At 48, she carried herself with the unearned authority of someone who believed they owned the world. Her blonde bob was always pristine, her smile tight and calculated. She lived in Willow Creek for a decade, and though she held no official position, she declared herself the unofficial head of the neighborhood's homeowners association, an HOA that, unbeknownst to most, didn't exist. Karen's self-appointed role gave her a platform to meddle, to judge, to dictate. She was the architect of petty rules. No loud music after 8 p.m., no unapproved lawn ornaments, no stepping out of line. Marcus had never liked Karen. Not because she was cruel, though she often was, but because she assumed the worst of everyone. To her, every neighbor was a potential rule breaker, every stranger a threat. He'd seen her berate Mrs. Alvarez for planting tulips that were too red and scold young Timmy for riding his bike too fast. Marcus kept his distance, offering polite nods but avoiding her gaze. He didn't need trouble. Trouble, however, found him. It was a crisp October morning when the incident occurred. Marcus was watering his roses when Karen stormed down the sidewalk, her heels clicking like gunfire. Her face was a mask of fury, her eyes locked on him. Behind her trailed a small entourage of neighbors, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. "Marcus Thompson," Karen's voice cut through the air, shrill and commanding. "You've got some explaining to do." Marcus lowered his watering can, his brow furrowing. "Morning, Karen. What's this about?" "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, jabbing a manicured finger at him. "The Thompson family heirloom is gone, and you were the last person seen near it." The Thompson family heirloom was a gaudy, gold-plated statue of a lion, perched proudly on the community lawn at the neighborhood's entrance. It was an eyesore, but Karen had championed its installation, claiming it was a gift from a prominent resident named Thompson. No relation to Marcus. Most suspected Karen had bought it herself, a monument to her own ego. Regardless, it was worth thousands, and its disappearance was a scandal. "I haven't been near that statue," Marcus said calmly, setting the watering can down. "You sure you've got the right person?" "Oh, I'm sure," Karen sneered, crossing her arms. "Mrs. Jenkins saw you lurking around the lawn last night. And let's be honest, Marcus, you're not exactly rolling in money. A statue like that could fetch a pretty penny, couldn't it?" The accusation hit like a punch. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his calm demeanor cracking under the weight of her words. The neighbors murmured, their eyes darting between him and Karen. Mrs. Jenkins, a frail woman with a penchant for gossip, nodded vigorously. "I saw him," she chimed in, "skulking around at dusk, looking suspicious." "I was walking my dog," Marcus said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "I do it every evening. You've seen me, Mrs. Jenkins." "Don't try to weasel out of this," Karen barked. "You're a thief, Marcus, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The crowd grew louder, whispers turning to accusations. Marcus scanned their faces, people he'd waved to, shared coffee with, helped with groceries. Now they looked at him like a criminal. His heart sank, but he refused to let Karen see him crumble. "I didn't take anything," he said firmly. "Check the security cameras. They'll show I wasn't there." Karen's smile twisted, a predator sensing weakness. "Oh, we'll check the cameras all right. And when they prove you're guilty, you'll be out of this neighborhood faster than you can say thief." The accusation spread like wildfire. By noon, the Willow Creek Community Facebook group was ablaze with posts. "Marcus Thompson stole the lion statue," one read. "I always knew he was shady," another declared. Karen fueled the flames, posting a photo of the empty pedestal with a caption, "Our neighborhood deserves better than thieves like Marcus Thompson." Comments piled up, each one a dagger. Kick him out. Call the police. He doesn't belong here. Marcus sat in his living room staring at his phone, the vitriol washing over him. His hands trembled, not with fear but with rage. He'd worked hard to build a life here, to be a good neighbor, a good man. Now, because of one woman's lie, it was unraveling. He wanted to fight back, to scream his innocence, but he knew words wouldn't be enough. He needed proof. That evening, Marcus marched to the community center, where Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss the theft. The room was packed, the air thick with tension. Karen stood at the front, a queen holding court, her fake HOA badge gleaming on her blazer. She recounted the evidence against Marcus, her voice dripping with righteous indignation. "This is a neighborhood of honor," she declared. "We can't let people like Marcus destroy what we've built." The crowd roared in agreement, their anger a living thing. Marcus stood at the back, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. He'd had enough. "Karen," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "you keep talking about honor, but you're the one lying. I didn't steal anything, and you know it. Play the security footage. Let's see who's telling the truth." Karen's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Fine," she said, gesturing to the community center's ancient projector. "Let's put this to rest." The room fell silent as the footage loaded. The screen flickered, revealing a grainy view of the community lawn. The timestamp showed the previous night, 7:43 p.m. There was Marcus, walking his dog, Rusty, a golden retriever who bounded happily at his side. He passed the statue, didn't even glance at it, and continued down the street. The crowd murmured, some looking sheepish. Karen's face tightened, but she wasn't done. "Keep watching," she insisted. "He could have come back." The footage rolled on. At 8:15 p.m., a figure appeared, hooded and furtive. They approached the statue, glanced around, and began prying it from its pedestal. The crowd leaned forward, breaths held. The figure turned, their face briefly illuminated by a streetlight. It was Karen. A gasp ripped through the room. Karen's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The crowd erupted, voices overlapping in a cacophony of shock and fury. "You stole it!" Mrs. Jenkins shrieked, pointing at Karen. "You framed him. You lied to us," another neighbor shouted. "What else have you lied about?" Marcus stood still, his heart pounding. He'd expected vindication, but the sight of Karen's unraveling was something else entirely. She'd built her empire on lies, and now it was crumbling. I didn't," Karen stammered, but the crowd drowned her out. Someone threw a crumpled HOA notice at her. Others surged forward, demanding answers. The fake HOA, the statue, her endless rules. It was all a sham, and they'd fallen for it. Marcus raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I don't want revenge. I just want the truth. Karen, why'd you do it?" Karen's eyes darted, searching for an escape, but there was none. She sank into a chair, her bravado gone. I needed the money," she whispered. "My husband left. The bills piled up. I thought I could sell it. Blame someone else. You were easy." The admission hung in the air, raw and ugly. Marcus nodded, not in forgiveness, but in understanding. He turned to the crowd. "I'm not a thief," he said, "but I'm not your enemy either. Let's move on. Let's be better." The room was quiet, the weight of his words settling over them. For Marcus, it wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about reclaiming his dignity, his place in a community that had turned on him so quickly. He walked out, head high, leaving Karen to face the consequences. The air outside the community center was cool, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the confrontation inside. Marcus paused on the steps, letting the night wrap around him like a balm. His heart still raced, the adrenaline of the moment refusing to fade. He'd cleared his name, exposed Karen's lies, but the victory felt hollow. The neighbors' faces, once warm with smiles, now twisted with judgment, lingered in his mind. How quickly they'd turned, how easily they'd believed the worst. Rusty, his golden retriever, bounded up, tail wagging, oblivious to the storm that had just broken. Marcus knelt, scratching behind the dog's ears, drawing comfort from the simple loyalty of a creature that didn't judge. You're the only one who never doubted me, huh, boy? He murmured. Rusty licked his hand, and for a moment, Marcus let himself smile. Inside, the chaos continued. He could hear the shouts, the clamor of voices demanding accountability. Karen was at the center of it, her empire of control reduced to ashes. Part of him wanted to go back, to see her squirm, but he resisted. Revenge wouldn't heal the wound she'd inflicted. Only time and maybe something more could do that. The next morning, Willow Creek was a different place. The news of Karen's deception had spread faster than her accusation against Marcus. The community Facebook group, once a battlefield of vitriol, was now a war zone of apologies and outrage. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," one post read. "We should have known better." Another declared, "Karen Whitaker is a fraud. No more fake HOA." A petition circulated to dismantle the so-called HOA, garnering hundreds of likes within hours. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through the posts. The apologies were nice, but they didn't erase the sting of betrayal. He'd been a good neighbor, helped Mr. Patel fix his fence, brought soup to Mrs. Alvarez when she was sick, coached Timmy's soccer team. Yet at the first whisper of scandal, they'd turned on him. He didn't blame them, not entirely. Karen's charisma, her knack for weaving lies into truths, was a force of its own. But it made him wonder, what did it mean to belong somewhere, if belonging could be so fragile? His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Jenkins. "Marcus, I'm ashamed of myself. Can we talk?" He stared at the message, torn. Mrs. Jenkins had been Karen's loudest cheerleader, her accusation the spark that lit the fire. But her words now seemed genuine, heavy with regret. He typed a reply. "Sure, come by this afternoon." As he set the phone down, a knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find a small crowd of neighbors, Mr. Patel, Mrs. Alvarez, Timmy's mom, and others, standing on his porch. Their faces were sheepish, some holding casseroles or flowers, like offerings at an altar of atonement. "Marcus," Mr. Patel began, his voice thick with emotion, "we owe you an apology. We let Karen manipulate us. We should have trusted you." Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, her eyes glistening. "You've always been kind to us, Marcus. We failed you. Please let us make it right." Marcus looked at them, their sincerity undeniable, but their presence overwhelming. He wanted to forgive, to move on, but the hurt was still raw. "I appreciate you coming," he said, his voice steady. "I just need some time, okay?" They nodded, leaving their gifts on the porch, their footsteps heavy as they retreated. Marcus closed the door, leaning against it, his chest tight. Forgiveness wasn't a switch he could flip. It was a journey, and he wasn't there yet. Karen, meanwhile, was drowning in the wreckage of her own making. After the meeting, she'd fled the community center, the crowd's jeers ringing in her ears. She locked herself in her house, blinds drawn, phone off, unable to face the world she'd alienated. The mirror in her bathroom reflected a stranger, pale, disheveled, eyes red from crying. For the first time in years, Karen saw herself clearly, and she didn't like what she saw. She'd always justified her actions. The fake HOA gave her purpose, a way to fill the void left by her husband's departure. The rules, the control, the pedestal she'd built, they were her armor against a world that felt chaotic, unkind. Accusing Marcus had been a desperate act, born of financial panic and the need to deflect suspicion. She'd chosen him because he was quiet, unassuming, an easy target. She hadn't expected the cameras, hadn't anticipated the truth. Now the consequences were relentless. Her doorbell rang incessantly, neighbors demanding explanations. Hateful messages flooded her inbox, calling her a liar, a fraud, a disgrace. The local news had picked up the story, dubbing it the Willow Creek scandal, with Karen cast as the villain. She'd lost everything, her reputation, her influence, her place in the community she'd once ruled. But the worst was the silence within her. No one to blame, no excuses left. Just the weight of her choices, pressing down like a stone. She sat on her living room floor, surrounded by fake HOA documents, and wept. Not for the statue, not for the money, but for the person she'd become. A week later, Marcus was pruning his roses when Mrs. Jenkins arrived. She looked smaller than he remembered, her usual gossip-fueled bravado replaced by a quiet humility. She clutched a tin of homemade cookies, her hands trembling. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I believed Karen because it was easier than questioning her. I was wrong." Marcus set his shears down, studying her. The anger he'd felt had dulled, replaced by a weary understanding. "Why'd you go along with her, Mrs. Jenkins? You've known me for 2 years. You know I'm not a thief." She looked away, shame etching lines on her face. "Karen had a way of making you feel like you were part of something important. Her rules, her meetings. It felt like we were protecting the neighborhood. I didn't see how toxic it was until you showed us." Marcus nodded, the cookie still in her hands, a silent plea. "I get it," he said, "but trust is hard to rebuild. You hurt me, Mrs. Jenkins. All of you did." "I know," she said, tears spilling over. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please tell me." He took the cookies not because he wanted them, but because he saw her trying. "Just be better," he said. "That's all I ask." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and left. Marcus watched her go, feeling a small weight lift. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Karen's reckoning came unexpectedly. One evening, unable to bear the isolation, she ventured to the community lawn, where the lion statue had once stood. The pedestal was empty, a stark reminder of her failure. She sat on a nearby bench, staring at the ground, when footsteps approached. It was Marcus. She froze, bracing for anger, but his expression was calm, unreadable. He sat on the opposite end of the bench, saying nothing. The silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. "Why are you here?" She finally asked, her voice hoarse. "Same reason as you, maybe," he said. "Trying to make sense of it all." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I don't think there's any sense to make. I ruined everything." Marcus looked at her, really looked, and saw not the tyrant who'd accused him, but a woman broken by her own choices. "You did," he said, not unkindly, "but that doesn't mean you can't change." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "Change? After this? They hate me, Marcus. I hate myself." "Good," he said, surprising her. "Hating what you did means you know it was wrong. That's where it starts." She stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or the possibility of redemption. "Why are you being kind to me?" she whispered. "I don't deserve it." "Because I've seen what happens when we assume the worst," he said. "I'm not saying it's easy or that I'm over it, but I believe people can be better. Even you." Karen's throat tightened, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to say something, to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Marcus stood, giving her a small nod before walking away, leaving her with the first seed of change. The neighborhood began to heal slowly. The fake HOA was disbanded, replaced by a genuine community council that prioritized fairness over control. Marcus, though hesitant, joined, his voice a steady guide. Karen, meanwhile, took her first steps toward atonement, starting with a public apology at the next community meeting. It was raw, unpolished, and met with skepticism, but it was a beginning. For Marcus, the journey was about more than clearing his name. It was about rebuilding trust, not just in others, but in himself. He learned to forgive, not for their sake, but for his own peace. And in that forgiveness, he found a deeper truth. Kindness, even in the face of betrayal, could change everything. The days following Marcus's encounter with Karen on the community lawn were quiet, but not peaceful. Willow Creek buzzed with a strange energy, a mix of relief, guilt, and the slow unraveling of old habits. The fake HOA was gone, its rules reduced to crumpled papers and recycling bins, but the scars it left lingered. Neighbors smiled at Marcus again, their greetings warmer, their eyes carrying the weight of unspoken apologies. He nodded back, polite as always, but a part of him remained guarded. Trust, once broken, was like a cracked vase. You could glue it back together, but the fractures would always show. Marcus threw himself into routine to keep the lingering hurt at bay. He tended his garden, walked Rusty, coached Timmy's soccer team. The kids, blissfully unaware of the neighborhood's drama, greeted him with high fives and laughter, their innocence a reminder of why he stayed. But at night, alone in his small house, the memory of the accusation crept in. Karen's voice, sharp and accusing, echoed in his mind. The crowd's jeers, the sting of betrayal. It wasn't just about the statue. It was about being seen as less than, as someone who didn't belong. One morning as he sipped coffee on his porch, a delivery van pulled up. A young man hopped out, carrying a large package wrapped in brown paper. "Marcus Thompson?" he asked, checking a clipboard. "That's me," Marcus said, puzzled. "Sign here, please. It's from, well, it doesn't say who, just says, for Marcus." Marcus signed, and the driver handed over the package. It was heavy, oddly shaped. He carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen table. Rusty sniffed at it, tail wagging, as Marcus tore away the paper. Inside was a wooden carving of a dog, remarkably like Rusty, its golden fur captured in smooth, polished lines. A note was tucked beneath it. "Thank you for showing me there's another way. I'm trying." K. Marcus stared at the note, his jaw tightening. Karen. The carving was beautiful, clearly handmade, but it didn't erase what she'd done. He set it on it of the counter, unsure whether to keep it or toss it. It was a gesture, but gestures weren't enough. Not yet. Karen's life, meanwhile, was a study in reconstruction. Her public apology at the community meeting had been a start, but it hadn't won her any allies. The neighbors listened, some with folded arms, others with skeptical frowns. A few, like Mrs. Alvarez, offered cautious nods, but most kept their distance. Karen didn't blame them. She'd spent years building walls, rules, lies, control, and now she was on the outside, knocking to be let back in. She started small. She stopped by Mrs. Jenkins' house with a batch of brownies, an apology for dragging her into the statue scheme. Mrs. Jenkins, still stinging from her own role in the fiasco, accepted the brownies but kept the conversation short. Karen didn't push. She volunteered to clean up the community lawn, picking up litter and weeding the flower beds, tasks she'd once delegated with a sneer. Passers-by watched, some whispering, others ignoring her. She kept her head down, the work a kind of penance. The hardest part was facing herself. Every night she sat in her living room, the silence deafening. The fake HOA documents were gone, shredded and burned, but their legacy haunted her. She'd been so sure of her rightness, so convinced she was protecting the neighborhood. Now she saw it for what it was, a desperate grab for power, a way to mask her own insecurities. Her husband's departure, the mounting bills, the fear of losing control, it had twisted her into someone she barely recognized. The wooden carving for Marcus had been her first real step toward change. She'd spent hours in her garage sanding and shaping, pouring her regret into every curve. It wasn't much, but it was honest. His silence since receiving it hurt, but she understood. Trust, she was learning, was earned, not demanded. The neighborhood's healing was a collective effort, fragile but determined. The new community council, led by Mr. Patel and Mrs. Alvarez, held its first meeting in the community center. Marcus attended, more out of duty than enthusiasm. The room felt different without Karen's domineering presence. No fake badges, no endless rules. The agenda was simple: rebuilding trust, fostering connection. Ideas flowed: potlucks, a community garden, a mentorship program for kids. Marcus suggested a soccer clinic, and the room lit up with support. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope. After the meeting, Mrs. Alvarez pulled him aside. "You're a good man, Marcus," she said, her eyes warm. "What you said to Karen on the lawn, it took strength. Not everyone would have done that." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just said what I felt. Doesn't make me a saint." "No," she agreed, smiling. "It makes you human. That's enough." Her words stayed with him as he walked home, Rusty trotting at his side. Human. It was a simple word, but it carried weight. He'd been dehumanized by Karen's accusation, reduced to a stereotype, a thief. Reclaiming his humanity wasn't just about proving his innocence. It was about living with dignity, even when others tried to take it away. A month after the scandal, Willow Creek held its first community potluck. The community lawn, once a stage for Karen's ego, was transformed into a vibrant gathering space. Tables groaned under the weight of casseroles, salads, and desserts, their aromas mingling with laughter and music. Kids ran through the grass, chasing glow sticks as the sun set. Marcus stood at the edge, a plate of ribs in hand, watching the scene unfold. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. He noticed Karen at the far end of the lawn, setting out a tray of cookies. She moved quietly, almost invisibly, as if afraid to draw attention. A few neighbors took cookies, offering polite nods but no conversation. Marcus watched, torn. Part of him wanted to keep his distance, to let her figure it out alone. But another part, the part that had sat with her on that bench, seen the crack in her armor, urged him to act. He walked over, plate in hand. "Cookies look good," he said, his tone neutral. Karen looked up, startled, then cautious. "Thanks. I wasn't sure if I should come." "You're here," he said simply. "That's something." She nodded, her eyes flickering with gratitude. "The carving, did you get it?" "I did," he said. "It's nice work. Rusty likes it." A small smile broke through her guarded expression. "I'm glad. I know it doesn't fix anything, but—" "It's a start," he cut in, echoing her own thoughts. "Keep going." Farii. She nodded again, stronger this time, and Marcus moved on, joining Timmy's mom at a nearby table. He didn't look back, but he felt the moment settle, a tiny bridge built over a vast chasm. Karen's journey was far from over, but the potluck marked a turning point. She began attending council meetings not to lead but to listen. She joined the community garden project, her hands in the dirt alongside neighbors she'd once scorned. The work was humbling, grounding, a reminder that growth took time. Some neighbors warmed to her, others kept their distance, but she pressed on, driven by a quiet determination to be better. Marcus, too, was changing. The potluck had shown him what Willow Creek could be, a place where mistakes didn't define you, where kindness could rebuild what judgment tore down. He forgave, not all at once, but in pieces. Mrs. Jenkins' cookies became a weekly ritual, their conversations growing longer, lighter. Mr. Patel invited him to poker nights, and Mrs. Alvarez taught him her secret salsa recipe. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was his. One evening, as he walked Rusty past the community lawn, he saw Karen planting tulips near the empty pedestal. She looked up, their eyes meeting briefly. No words were needed, just a nod, an acknowledgement of the work they were both doing, separately but together. Marcus tightened Rusty's leash and kept walking, the stars bright above. He thought of the carving on his counter, the note tucked away in a drawer. Maybe he'd put it on the mantel someday. Maybe he'd forgive her fully, or maybe he wouldn't. But for now, he was content to live, to grow, to be part of something bigger than himself. The seasons turned in Willow Creek, the crisp bite of autumn giving way to the chill of winter. Snow dusted the lawns, softening the edges of a neighborhood still finding its footing. Marcus watched the transformation from his porch, a mug of hot cocoa warming his hands. The community had changed since the scandal, not just in structure, but in spirit. The community council's efforts, potlucks, garden projects, soccer clinics, had woven a new fabric, one where connection trumped control. But change, Marcus knew, was a slow burn, and not every wound healed cleanly. His life had settled into a new rhythm. The soccer clinic was a hit, with kids from across Willow Creek joining, their laughter a balm for the lingering ache of betrayal. Neighbors stopped by more often, not with casseroles or apologies, but with invitations. To barbecues, to game nights, to simply sit and talk. Marcus accepted, cautiously at first, then with growing ease. The wooden carving of Rusty now sat on his mantel, a quiet reminder of Karen's gesture and his own capacity to move forward. He hadn't forgiven her, not fully, but he'd stopped carrying the weight of her accusation. That, he decided, was enough for now. Karen, meanwhile, was navigating her own path, one paved with small, deliberate steps. The potluck had been a turning point, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She'd expected rejection, even deserved it. But Marcus's words, "keep going," had lodged in her heart like a seed. She clung to them, especially on the hardest days, when neighbors' cold shoulders or whispered gossip threatened to pull her back into shame. Her work in the community garden became her anchor. She showed up every weekend, her hands calloused from digging, her clothes streaked with dirt. Mrs. Alvarez, who'd once been a target of her petty rules, became an unlikely ally, teaching her how to prune roses and coax life from stubborn soil. Their conversations were tentative, focused on plants rather than pests, but they were a start. Karen learned to listen, to ask questions instead of issuing commands. It was humbling, and she was surprised to find she liked it. She also started writing letters. Not emails or texts, but handwritten notes slipped into neighbors' mailboxes under the cover of night. Each one was an apology, specific and raw, addressing the ways she'd hurt them, berating Mrs. Jenkins for her tulips, fining Mr. Patel for his fence, scolding Timmy's mom for her son's bike. Some neighbors tossed the letters, others read them in silence, but a few responded. Mrs. Jenkins sent a note back, short but kind. "I see you're trying. Keep at it." Those words, so like Marcus's, gave Karen the courage to continue. One snowy afternoon, Marcus was shoveling his driveway when Timmy's mom, Lisa, approached, her breath puffing in the cold air. She carried a thermos of coffee, her smile warm but hesitant. "Thought you could use a break," she said, handing him the thermos. "Shoveling's no joke." Marcus took it, grateful. "Thanks, Lisa. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said, shoving her hands in her pockets. "Look, Marcus, I've been meaning to say, I'm sorry, not just for the statue thing, but for not stepping up sooner. I knew Karen was full of it, but I stayed quiet. That's on me." Marcus poured coffee into the thermos lid, the steam rising between them. "You're here now," he said, echoing his words to Karen. "That counts." Lisa nodded, relief softening her features. "You're a better person than most. You know that? This neighborhood's lucky to have you." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise but warmed by it. "We're all just trying to figure it out." They talked for a while, the snow falling softly around them. It was a small moment, but it felt like a stitch in the fabric of Willow Creek, pulling the community closer together. Karen's biggest test came in January, when the community council announced a winter festival to celebrate the neighborhood's renewal. The event would be held on the community lawn, with lights, music, and a bonfire to chase away the cold. Everyone was invited to contribute: food, decorations, talents. Karen hesitated, unsure if her presence would be welcome, but Mrs. Alvarez encouraged her to join. "You've been showing up," Mrs. Alvarez said, her tone firm but kind. "Don't stop now." Tough for him. Karen decided to contribute something personal: wooden carvings like the one she'd made for Marcus. She spent weeks in her garage crafting miniature figures: dogs, birds, children playing. Each one a reflection of Willow Creek's spirit. She didn't sign them, didn't want credit, just left them in a box at the council's office with a note. "For the festival, from a neighbor." The festival was a triumph. The lawn glowed with fairy lights, the air filled with the scent of mulled cider and roasted marshmallows. Kids sledded down a small hill, their laughter echoing, while adults mingled around the bonfire. Marcus was there, helping Mr. Patel grill burgers, his laughter louder than it had been in months. He felt at home, not just in Willow Creek, but in himself. Karen arrived late, her nerves fraying. She stayed on the fringes, watching the joy she'd once tried to control. Her carvings were displayed on a table, each one tagged with a small card. "Made by a Willow Creek neighbor." A few people picked them up, admiring the craftsmanship, and Karen's heart swelled with a quiet pride she hadn't felt in years. Marcus noticed her, standing alone in the shadows. He hesitated, then walked over, a cup of cider in hand. "You made those carvings, didn't you?" he asked, nodding toward the table. She flushed, caught off guard. "How'd you know?" "They've got the same heart as Rusty's," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "They're good, Karen, really good." Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away. "Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot." He nodded, offering her the cider. "You should join us. It's your neighborhood, too." She took the cup, her hands trembling. "I'm not sure I've earned that yet." "You're here," he said, his voice steady. "That's how you earn it." He walked back to the bonfire, leaving her with the warmth of the cider and his words. Karen took a deep breath and stepped forward, joining the crowd. A few neighbors glanced her way, some with curiosity, others with caution, but no one turned her away. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. As winter melted into spring, Willow Creek continued to grow. The community garden bloomed, its roses and tulips a testament to shared effort. The soccer clinic expanded, drawing kids from neighboring areas, and Marcus found himself mentoring not just players, but their parents too. He became a quiet leader, not by seeking power, but by living with integrity. Karen's transformation deepened. She enrolled in a woodworking class, turning her carvings into a small business, donating the proceeds to the community council. She spoke less, listened more, and found joy in the small connections she'd once overlooked. A smile from Mrs. Jenkins, a thank you from Mr. Patel, a wave from Timmy as he rode his bike. She still carried the weight of her past, but it no longer defined her. One evening, Marcus and Karen found themselves at the community lawn again, both there to plant new flowers for the spring season. They worked side by side, the silence comfortable, broken only by the rustle of leaves and Rusty's playful barks. "You ever think about leaving?" Karen asked suddenly, her hands deep in the soil. "After everything, I mean." Marcus paused, considering. "Thought about it," he admitted. "But this is home, flaws and all." She nodded, understanding. "I'm glad you stayed." He looked at her, seeing not the woman who'd accused him, but the one who was trying every day to be better. "I'm glad you're still here too," he said. They finished planting, the new flowers bright against the earth. As they stood, Marcus extended a hand. Karen took it, her grip firm, and they shook, not as enemies, not as friends, but as neighbors, bound by a shared journey. The story of Willow Creek spread beyond its borders, a tale of truth, redemption, and the power of kindness. Marcus and Karen, once at odds, became symbols of what the neighborhood could be, a place where mistakes were acknowledged, where growth was possible, where honor and gratitude could rebuild what was broken. The lion statue was never replaced, its empty pedestal a reminder that true value lay not in monuments, but in the people who called Willow Creek home. Marcus walked Rusty under a spring sky, the air sweet with possibility. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he was part of something bigger, a community that had faltered but found its way. And in that, he found peace. The end.